Hi there, thank you everyone for joining us today for the Stanford Pain Management Pain Science Lecture Series. This lecture series was created by Dr. Heather Poupore-King, a Stanford pain psychologist, and allows our providers to share valuable information about chronic pain management with the community each month. My name is Trent Tao, and I'm a Stanford Pain Psychology Postdoctoral Fellow, and I'll be your moderator this evening. And my colleague, Dr. Mandy Conrad, is also joining us today as another moderator. Before I introduce this month's speaker, I have a few announcements. First, we'll be recording this lecture, so we will not take any questions during the presentation, but there will be opportunity for questions at the end. We'll be ending promptly at 6 p.m., so we'll be stopping the lecture by 5:45 p.m. for questions. Please submit your questions through the Q&A feature in the Zoom app. You should see that at the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, we do not have access to medical records for this lecture, so please discuss your personal medical question with your individual medical provider. In the chat box, I will share links to several resources, including upcoming support groups and recordings of this lecture series on YouTube. We'll also share information on the last slide of today's lecture with additional resources. If you happen to click on any of these links in the chat, it will likely open up in a different window, so we'll just have to come back to the webinar by returning to the Zoom app. At the end of the lecture, I'll be sharing a very short survey with you. Please do complete this poll before you leave to let us know what your experiences are like today in our lecture. And now I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Fiona Barwick, clinical associate professor at Stanford Medicine, who will be giving a lecture on leveraging your sleep and circadian biology to get better sleep.
Thank you, Dr. Tao. Appreciate your help in arranging this, and certainly want to express appreciation to Dr. King for organizing the Pain Science Lecture Series. I am more than happy to talk to you today about how to leverage your sleep and circadian biology to get you better sleep. I do work not only a clinical associate professor, I do work at the Stanford Sleep Medicine Center as a director of sleep and circadian health. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I have no financial conflicts of interest to disclose. So let's just jump right in. First, let's talk about what insomnia is, the technical definition, the diagnostic criteria. Are problems falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up too early, unable to get back to sleep? These problems have to have been going on for a while, so occurring at least 3 times a week, going on for at least 3 or more months. Honestly, we see people who have sleep problems almost nightly that have been going on for years. And the problems with sleep have to occur despite adequate opportunity and circumstances to sleep. If you're not allowing yourself sufficient time in bed, that does not qualify as insomnia. Or if your sleep environment is not sufficiently protected, so you're being woken up by external sounds or events, that also does not qualify as insomnia. So you have to be allowing yourself adequate opportunity and circumstances to sleep, and yet you're still awake at night. That is the key with insomnia. And it also has to be causing some sort of perceived distress or impairment during the day. The 3 complaints we hear most often from folks: they feel tired, they feel irritable, they worry about sleep. Now, it's very important to distinguish between acute and chronic insomnia. Being awake at night, although if you have insomnia, it never feels like a good thing, it's not always a bad thing. If there is a fire happening at night, you want to be awake to deal with it. Otherwise, you won't survive. If you have an early morning flight to catch for your 3-week vacation, you want to be awake. You're probably looking forward to it. So it's not always a bad thing to be awake at night. And oftentimes acute insomnia, so insomnia that lasts less than 3 months, occurs in the context of stress. So there's a very clear warning signal. There is some sort of threat or danger that you need to address, and you need to be awake to address it. Pathway is clear, the stressor is the clear and obvious cause, and the symptom is you're awake at night. The treatment course is pretty obvious. It can be resolved as soon as the stressor disappears, or you become more confident in your ability to manage the stressor, whatever it is. The insomnia usually goes away. And I do want to be clear here. Stress disrupts sleep for everyone. This is part of being human. We will all have wakeful nights because of stress, perhaps even more so during this coming week than in previous weeks. But the stress itself could be negative. It could also be positive. You could lose your job or you could get promoted. You could get divorced or you could get married. Anytime there is a transition, an adjustment that causes us stress, we human beings don't deal well with uncertainty, as I suspect everyone is experiencing now. And so that can disrupt sleep. But again, once the stressor resolves, sleep normalizes. Chronic insomnia is different. Chronic insomnia, your concern about the stress has now shifted to worry about sleep itself. So you are worrying about a biological system that is intact, which means it's a false alarm. And the worry is what's keeping you awake. Now, there are a lot of different things that can contribute to chronic insomnia. The worry itself is one of them, but people can certainly have predisposing factors that are genetic or temperamental in origin. There can be perpetuating factors as well. So there are multiple pathways that contribute to the maintenance of chronic insomnia. And as a result, the treatment course requires a multidisciplinary approach. Medication should be used cautiously. We'll talk about medications and their impact on normal sleep. But the good news with chronic insomnia, there are long-term solutions. You can actually experience total resolution of your insomnia symptoms if you do the right things. Before we get into what those things are, let's talk about the vicious cycle of insomnia and chronic pain, the strong overlap between these two conditions. For folks with insomnia, more than 40% also report some pain symptoms. In primary care settings, more than 40% of people with chronic pain will have sleep problems. And in specialty clinic settings, it's closer to 90% and higher of people with chronic pain are experiencing sleep problems. This makes sense. Of course, pain can wake you up at night and disrupt your sleep. But what's more interesting is, and this has been shown in some very large scale, long-term prospective studies lasting up to 11 years, for people who are reporting sleep problems at time 1, they have a greater than 3-fold risk of experiencing pain symptoms at a later time. So there's this very close relationship between insomnia and chronic pain. And this vicious cycle is both a physical vicious cycle and a psychological vicious cycle. And it happens with both insomnia and chronic pain. The physical vicious cycle is people do less. They are less active. They're less active because they didn't sleep well, so they feel fatigued during the day. If pain woke them up, they may be in more pain the following day, so that also reduces their activity. But unfortunately, less activity means you're going to have worse sleep and worse pain. And so becoming more active is actually one of the critical parts of managing sleep and chronic pain. For the psychological vicious cycle, if you are struggling with sleep at night or you're being woken up by pain, of course, when you wake up the next morning, you're going to be frustrated, a little more anxious. Maybe your mood is going to be down. As a result, you're going to be more worried about the sleep, about the pain. That's going to contribute to a less positive quality of life during your day, probably doing less. That in turn will contribute to worse sleep and pain problems at night. And so that vicious cycle of anxiety and depression, worse sleep, worse pain continues. There are definitely ways of getting yourself out of this, but if you're going to get yourself out of this vicious cycle, you have got to use what's called a biopsychosocial model for managing your chronic condition. For any chronic condition, the biopsychosocial approach is the way to go. Historically, I think hospitals have focused on the biological side, so the injury, the disease, the genetics behind pain or insomnia. But in fact, the psychological and the social sides are equally important because we know research shows that if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, it's actually going to make your sleep or pain problems worse. If you have a trauma background, it can make sleep or pain problems worse. If you haven't learned good coping skills, it can make sleep or pain problems worse. The same with the social piece. If you have work that's stressing you out, or if you're not able to work and that's also stressing you out, that can exacerbate pain and sleep problems. If you're not feeling fully supported by family or friends, if you're feeling more isolated, that will also exacerbate sleep and pain problems. So it's very, very important to address insomnia and chronic pain from all of these angles. Now we're focusing on sleep today, but the reality is if you help yourself get better sleep, you will actually help manage your pain more effectively. And the beautiful part about all this is that biopsychosocial model is based on this mind-body connection. The fact that what we think is connected to what we feel, is connected to what we do, is connected to what happens in our body. What this means is if you change how you think about something, like the experience of being awake at night, you can actually change how you feel about it, what you do about it, and the state of tension in your body. If you change what you do about sleep, for example, spending less time in bed, you can actually change how you think about it, how you feel about it, and the state of tension in your body. If you change the state of tension in your body, for example, by relaxing before you get into bed, you can change what you think, what you feel, and what you're doing. So the nice thing about this mind-body connection is not only is it critical for managing any chronic condition, including pain and insomnia, but these are strategies you can learn that are totally in your control. Doesn't need a prescription, doesn't require a procedure, and they have cumulative benefits. The more you practice these strategies over time, the more quickly you can tap into the benefits and the stronger those benefits become. So my focus today is on helping you understand how sleep and circadian biology can leverage your sleep, can improve your sleep when you do the right things and don't do the wrong things. What do I mean by this? There are three things to consider when you're thinking about your sleep. Number one, do you have the correct circadian placement for your sleep window? We will talk in more detail about all of these, but right now let's just stick with the question. So do you have the correct circadian placement for your sleep window? Do you have a consistent sleep schedule to support that? And are you using light strategically? Number two, for sleep drive, are you building sufficient sleep drive? Are you active enough during the day, physically, mentally, socially? Are you spending an appropriate amount of time in bed? Not too long, not too much time resting or napping during the day. And finally, as you get ready for bed or if you're awake at night, is your mind calm? Is your body relaxed? Now, none of this guarantees sleep because nothing guarantees sleep. But if these things are in place, it is likely your sleep will unfold. So that circadian system, let's talk about that. The circadian system, we've got this master pacemaker in our brain, this suprachiasmatic nucleus, that little red dot that you see. It is most sensitive to light. Light is our most powerful activating cue. So light comes in through the eye, gets sent to that pacemaker, and the light cues help the pacemaker determine if it's time for us to be awake, in which case melatonin gets suppressed, or if it's time for us to be asleep, in which case melatonin gets released. Two important things about this system. Number one, as I said, light is the most powerful activating cue, so it can work for you or against you. It works for you if you get lots of daylight exposure. Daylight exposure builds sleep drive, keeps a strong, clear circadian rhythm, helps with mood, helps with energy. So you want lots of daylight exposure. Now this could be, in pandemic times, this can be challenging, but we can actually also have a little bit more flexibility sometimes. So you want to make sure if you can that you're working near a window. You want to make sure if you can that you try to get out for brief moments, even at lunch or in the morning or in the afternoon, whenever you have a moment. If you can, just step outside, get some sunlight. The second thing about this system, apart from this greater response to daylight exposure, is screen time. While daylight can help you, screen time will hurt you. Why? Because the blue light from screens, and not all the blue light is blocked by the filters, the blue light from screens acts like a daylight cue. So if you are hitting your eyeballs with a lot of blue light in the 2 hours before bedtime, which is when your melatonin levels are starting to go up, you can inadvertently suppress and delay melatonin, which means it's going to be harder to fall asleep, or you might be waking up more at night. So from the light perspective, you want to use, From the light perspective, you want to use light strategically. The second thing about this system, it loves consistency. The more consistent you can be with your bedtime and your rise time and other things, the more the system can learn to anticipate and prepare you for what needs to be done. So it can help you feel more alert in the morning when you wake up. It can help you feel sleepier close to bedtime, as long as you're keeping a consistent schedule. Okay, so the sleep drive, that next system, we can go on to the next slide, Jen, thank you. So sleep drive is a biological drive. It works much like hunger. with hunger. The longer you go without eating, the hungrier you get. Sleep is similar. The longer you go without sleeping, the sleepier you get. So here we can see that when we first wake up, if we've slept, our sleep drive should be low, but it builds as we're awake and active. And then in that gray bar where we're supposed to be sleeping, we're sleepy enough, so we fall asleep and it starts to come down. And then we just go through the whole cycle of sleep drive building and coming down the next day and night. What helps build sleep drive? Well, staying awake longer, which means staying out of bed longer. If you're spending a lot of time resting in bed before you get into bed at night, so you extend your time in bed in the morning, or maybe in the afternoon, you spend 2-3 hours just resting, that's actually going to reduce your sleep drive. And so your sleep at night is not going to be as good. The other thing to build sleep drive is physical activity, social activity, mental activity, but especially physical activity. That is probably one of the best ways to build sleep drive. And in fact, that little molecule that I have there, adenosine, that molecule is the molecule that builds along with sleep drive and comes down as we sleep. So you can think of it like a sleep molecule. Obviously, the picture is more complicated than that, but that is the molecule that is most closely associated with sleep, especially deep sleep. Adenosine results from energy expenditure. If you're expending energy, you are creating adenosine. If you're creating adenosine, you're building sleep drive. If you're building sleep drive, at some point you're going to fall asleep. You can't break that system until you die. And there's no medication that produces adenosine. So there's no medication that actually recreates normal sleep. So this is very, very important, because what that means is the tools for building your sleep drive and getting better quality sleep at night are entirely at your disposal. It means spending an appropriate amount of time in bed, maybe keeping yourself awake a little longer, and also making sure you're active enough during the day. Now these two, go ahead, we can move to the next slide. These two systems work together, this sleep drive and the circadian process. Sleep drive is that blue line, so it's building as we're awake and active. We're actually getting sleepier as the day goes along, but the green line, the circadian system, while we're getting sleepier, sends out alerting cues to keep us awake. It's very important that when you'll notice that those alerting cues build across most of the day, but then at a certain point they start to drop off. So your alerting cues go down, and this happens just at a time when your sleep drive is high. That is the sleep gate. That is when you will notice being sleepy. However, you will also notice about an hour or two before the alerting cues drop off, they are at their highest point. That is called the wake maintenance zone. During that time, you actually feel very awake. And if you, at that time, engage in stimulating activities, you can continue to keep yourself alert well past that sleep gate, and you will miss the sleep cues. And now you're going to be going to bed much later, messing up your circadian rhythms, probably getting less good quality sleep. So you really want to pay close attention to the interaction of these two and pay attention to the sleep cues as you become a parent. We'll talk about ways you can help yourself do that. There is, however, in addition to sleep drive and the circadian system, there's a third system that disrupts this beautiful balance. If we can go to the next slide, Chen. Our stress response. So our autonomic nervous system regulates a lot of things we don't typically pay attention to: respiration, digestion, heart rate. When we are confronted with some sort of threat, that autonomic nervous system generates a sympathetic response, a fight or flight response. So heart rate and breathing will increase, muscles will tense, cortisol will spike, everything we need to help us manage whatever stressor or threat we confront, which is great. This is necessary, it's adaptive, it is an important part of how we survived, why we're here today. Unfortunately, the fight or flight system is incompatible with sleep. If you are highly stressed, if you're in fight or flight before you get into bed, if you wake up at night, you are going to be awake, which means the more anxious you get, the more frustrated you get, the more worried you get, the more awake you're going to be at night. So you want to make sure that sympathetic fight or flight response is low before you get into bed or if you wake up at night. Conversely, you want that parasympathetic response, that rest and digest response, high, because that system does exactly the opposite of the sympathetic. Slows your heart rate and breathing, relaxes your muscles, decreases cortisol. This is the state in which you can fall asleep. And there's no medication that blocks cortisol. The only thing that does it is engaging the parasympathetic system. And fortunately, there are very relatively straightforward ways to do this. So what are some of the things you can do to target each of these systems to help with sleep? If we go to the next slide, we're going to talk first about what you can do from the circadian perspective. Remember, we've got that pacemaker, most sensitive to light, loves consistency. So we can go to the next slide. First, know your chronotype. Know your body clock. All of us have different timing to our sleep. Some of us are morning types, so we feel sleepy very early, 8 in the evening, sometimes a little earlier, but then we're wide awake at 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning. Some of us feel sleepy more around 10 or 11 o'clock, but then we're naturally awake around 6 or 7 o'clock. And some of us don't feel sleepy until after midnight, not until 1 or 2 a.m. And then we're not really feeling awake until 9 or 10 a.m. This variability in chronotype, in the timing of our sleep is 50% genetic. We always tell people you will get your best sleep in your biologically best window. So listen to your body clock, respect your body clock. If you can sleep in or as close as possible to the timing that your body prefers, do so, regardless of what society tells us. Unfortunately, society discriminates against night owls. We act like everyone should be awake and alert at 7 a.m., which is profoundly unfair to night owls. Essentially, we demand that night owls do shift work. And we know that shift work is a health risk. So from our perspective, we're always encouraging people, if they can, to know your chronotype and sleep in the window that your body prefers. Next, thanks, Jen. You can go to the next slide. Keep your schedule consistent. So go to bed at the same-ish time every night. You can't force yourself to feel sleepy, so you do have to have a little bit of flexibility there. So you want to go to bed when you're sleepy, not get into bed when you're tired, because that's a little different. When we're sleepy, you'll notice your eyes might start to feel heavy or close, your head might start to nod. When you're tired, none of that is necessarily happening. You just feel kind of physically wiped or mentally wiped out. You want to go to bed when you're sleepy and not when you're tired. And you want to get up at the same time every morning. What happens, once again, is you do this over and over again, your mind and body learn, or your brain and body learn that this is your bedtime, this is your wake time. They help you feel more sleepy at bedtime, more alert at wake time. You can go to the next slide. You also want to have a very good wake-up routine in the morning. That morning rise time is actually the most important part of keeping your sleep schedule on track. Every morning, every one of us has to resync our body clock to our environment, because none of us have a body clock that's 24 hours. For most of us, it's a little longer. For some, it's a little shorter. But that means we all have to resync every morning. And it's morning light and activity to help you do that. So you definitely want to, you don't want to snooze. In fact, that red line, there's a formatting error there. The red line should be in front of the snooze. Thank you. Because no snoozing. Why? You know, there's something called sleep inertia. When we first wake up, there's a transition state as we go from sleep to wake, during which we often feel groggy and a little out of it. That sleep inertia lingers if you lie in bed. So if you hit the snooze button, you are going to experience that sleep inertia longer. It passes more quickly if you get up. The best thing to do in the morning is get up and start your day. You're going to feel better faster. Take a shower, get some morning light, putter around a bit. A little bit of physical activity can help, a little bit of mental engagement or social stimulation. I've worked with folks who did a morning playlist. Wonderful for getting you in a good mood in the morning. But you want things that help you feel more awake and more alert and dispel that sleep inertia more quickly, as well as things that keep your circadian clock on track. Okay, the next slide. We talked about how good it is to get daylight exposure and how unhelpful it is to get a lot of screen time at night. So you definitely want more daylight exposure and less screen time. The other thing we didn't mention is that screen time, the blue light, as I said, is a daylight cue, an alerting cue. So if you're getting a lot of blue light in that 2 hours before bedtime when your melatonin is supposed to be going up, that's not going to help your sleep. But we didn't even address the content. And the content on our phones is either stressful or rewarding. Either way, you're either getting a cortisol spike or a dopamine burst, both of which are going to wake you up more. So that's the other reason, we'll talk more about this when it comes to managing stress, but that's the other reason you really want to put your devices away in that hour or two before bedtime. Okay, next slide. And finally, sleep-wake is our most obvious circadian rhythm, but circadian rhythms are these 24-hour rhythms that govern most of our physiology and behavior. So when we feel hungry, when we feel strongest, when we feel most alert, changes in heart rate and blood pressure and body temperature, changes in melatonin and cortisol and neurotransmitters, all of these fluctuate on a 24-hour rhythm. And we tend to feel best and function best when our circadian rhythms are aligned. So the two big ones are usually sleep timing and meal timing. So you want to make sure with your meal timing, for example, that you have something to eat within an hour of waking up. So you signal your circadian system you are now awake and starting your day. And you want to finish your final meal 2 hours before your melatonin starts to go up, because once our melatonin starts to go up, our metabolism slows. You want to be finished with your eating and digesting before then, so that those calories you consume don't get stored more easily as fat. 2 hours before your melatonin onset means roughly 3.5 to 4 hours before your bedtime. That's when you should be finishing your final meal. Okay, next slide. So now let's move to what strategies we can use to target the sleep system to build a strong sleep drive. Go ahead, next slide. Go ahead, Shin, next slide. First, no, you're right. So first, just as you need to know your chronotype, you also need to know how much sleep you need. Sleep need varies between people. Not everyone needs 8 hours. This is a myth. This is actually a chart put out by the National Sleep Foundation. It shows average time or recommended time in bed across the lifespan, from infancy on the left all the way to adults who are 65 and older on the right. Just as there is a normal bell curve for height and weight and intelligence, there's a normal bell curve for sleep. So if we take the largest age group here, so the second one from the right, adults 26 to 64. The dark blue in the center, that's like the middle of the bell curve. So these are the average sleepers, the ones who need to spend 7 to 9 hours in bed to get the appropriate amount of sleep. Underneath the 6 hours are the short sleepers, the ones who need to spend 6 hours in bed to get the appropriate amount of sleep. And above at the top are the long sleepers, the ones who need to spend 10 hours in bed to get the appropriate amount of sleep. Now, what does it mean to be spending time in bed as a measure of your sleep? For an adult, if you're sleeping well, your sleep will be consolidated. It will be efficient. You'll be spending at least 85% of that time asleep. What does that translate into? Roughly 30 minutes or less to fall asleep, 30 minutes or less awake at night. That is your thumbnail sketch for what good sleep should look like. So if you're spending 7 to 9 hours in bed, no more of 30 minutes should be awake to fall asleep, no more than 30 minutes should be awake at night. So it's very important to recognize not only what the timing of your sleep is, but what your sleep need is. Because if you spend more time in bed than you can fill with sleep, several problems will ensue that will make sleep more problematic. And by the way, one other thing I want to point out with this chart, you will see that the average recommended time in bed decreases across the lifespan. This is critical. Sleep changes as we get older. For some reason, although we accept that most things change with age, we somehow think sleep should be exempt. And we think we should be sleeping the way we did when we were 8 years old. That will not happen when you're 38 or 48 or 58 or 68 or 78. Those days are gone. And so you have to adapt to the changes in sleep in healthy ways that don't inadvertently worsen your sleep. And one of those ways, believe it or not, is by spending less time in bed. Let's talk about why you want to do that. We can move to the next slide. So why would you want to consolidate your sleep? Why would you want to limit your time in bed? Well, look at what happens when you spend more time in bed than you can fill with sleep. At the very top, the baseline, this is someone who is getting into bed at 10, but not falling asleep right away. They're waking up at 9 in the morning, but not getting out of bed right away. There's some wakefulness in the middle of the night as well, and then some fragmented, poor quality sleep. There are 3 problems that occur when you are spending more time in bed than you can fill with sleep. First of all, your sleep drive is lower. For this person, they're spending long periods of time inactive, lying in bed, doing nothing. That means their sleep drive will be lower. Secondly, they have all this extra time to lie awake at night. And what do the people do when they're awake at night? Usually they worry. They worry about their sleep. They worry about other things. Worry keeps them awake. So now they have more time to lie awake, worrying and being wakeful. And finally, this person is spending as much time in bed as they are awake as they are asleep. And so they're teaching themselves, without even knowing it, to associate the bed with lying awake and not with sleep. You cannot get out of this pattern by extending your time in bed. The only way to get better quality sleep, drive up your sleep pressure, reduce the time you spend awake worrying, teach yourself to associate the bed with sleep, is by starting to limit the time you're spending in bed. So that is one good strategy you can use to build up your sleep drive and help improve the quality of your sleep by consolidating that sleep, shortening your sleep window. So now if we go to the next slide, activity. We talked about how activity builds sleep drive. This is especially true for physical activity. Physical activity helps sleep. It actually helps manage chronic pain more effectively. So very, very important to try to get some physical activity. This is challenging nowadays. Gyms are closed. We're not as comfortable doing things that we used to do for activity, but we all have to be creative. Walking outside, activities outside can be good. So walking outside or biking outside, running outside. There's some very good video workouts that you can do inside as well. You don't have to spend a long period of time, even if you're able to do 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. If you have to divide up the time that you're getting your physical activity, try to do that. It literally takes 3 minutes of activity to help boost our energy, improve our mood, and build up a little sleep drive. So even if you're doing just 3 to 5 minutes at a time, figure out ways you can incorporate some physical activity into your daily routine. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Now, for sleep drive, do not worry at night if you wake up. Waking up at night is normal for adults. On average, adults wake up 10 to 12 times a night. Usually, if they're awake for less than 3 minutes, they won't remember. Or if you're waking up, getting up, using the bathroom, coming back, falling asleep quickly, all perfectly normal. What wakes us up is not what keeps us up. So if you wake up at night, don't worry about that. Focus instead on what is keeping you up. And we will talk more about how to manage that, because usually it's the worry and the stress that are keeping you awake once you've woken up. And finally, for the next slide, don't use sleep aids, because there's no sleep aid. There's no substance, whether Ambien or Ativan or alcohol or cannabis, that recreates normal human sleep. All substances change sleep patterns. Often they do so by suppressing your deep sleep or suppressing your dream sleep, that REM sleep, or both. This is a picture of brain activity across the night. So on the bottom are the hours of the night, beginning of the night to end of the night, almost certainly a young sleeper. Most adults don't get or need 10 hours of sleep. On the side are the 3 states we can be in, either awake at the very top, in REM sleep, the rapid eye movement, or dream sleep, which is those dark bars, or non-REM sleep, which has the different stages going from lighter to deeper. And you can see we tend to get our cycles of deep sleep right up front, but medication, substances can suppress that. We tend to get more of our REM sleep in the second part of the night, but again, medications can suppress that. So there's no medication that recreates your sleep drive. There's no medication that recreates your natural sleep pattern. Much better to tap into, to leverage your sleep and circadian biology to improve your sleep. So finally, we've talked about strategies for targeting the circadian system. We've talked about strategies for targeting the sleep drive. Let's go to the next slide, talk about strategies for targeting that stress response, that calm mind, relaxed body. What are some of these strategies? One thing to emphasize, when we fall asleep at night, our brain shuts down from front to back. So it shuts down in a particular pattern. What does that mean? That means the first part to go offline is that frontal part, the blue, the light blue area with an F in front of it. That area is where your executive functioning is located. So your reasoning, your planning, your problem solving, your emotion regulation, not available at night. And the part of the brain that gets amplified is the limbic system, that orange part. The limbic system is all about emotional processing. So essentially your emotional brain is running the show at night, which is why it can seem perfectly reasonable in the middle of the night to spend 2 hours lying awake worrying about whatever went wrong 2 days ago, or maybe 20 years ago, or whatever could go wrong 2 days from now, or maybe 20 years from now. And in the morning, it often looks completely different because your executive brain is back online and it's asking you, why did you waste our time like that last night? That was pointless. So you really want to be aware of this tendency of the emotional brain to invite you to worry at night. You don't have to accept that invitation. If you're going to refuse the invitation, you do have to be prepared with some strategies. So what are some of these strategies? If we go to the next slide, You definitely want to reduce your stress, and we can go to the next slide. So first, wind down in the evening, at least an hour, maybe more before bedtime. Turn off your screens, put away your phones, stop watching TV unless it's something light and relaxing. Keep the lights dim, certainly put down your work, keep the temperature cool. Activities that require a little bit of effort and focus are okay. TV is sometimes a little too passive. Reading is good. Doing hobbies can be good. Puzzles is good. Spending time with family members is good. Talking with friends. Activities that evoke positive emotion or enhance relaxation, also great. Journaling, so you can sort of offload some of the stress and emotion from the day, can help. Thinking of 3 good things that happened during the day, sharing them with family members is a lovely routine to get into. The reality is, even though sleep changes as we get older, what remains the same is how we fall asleep most easily. We fall asleep most easily when we feel safe and comfortable and relaxed and loved. Anything you can do to evoke that state before you get into bed is going to be helpful. And of course, especially important in these current times. If we go to the next slide, you can wrap up your worries before bedtime. Worrying itself is not a constructive activity, and so you can make it more constructive by offloading the worry before you get into bed. What does that mean? 2 to 3 hours before you get into bed, you sit down with a piece of paper that has 3 columns. In the leftmost column, you write down whatever worries or concerns you might have that came up that day or perhaps the previous night. In the middle column, you have to write down if that worry or concern is in your control, if there's something you can do to resolve it either that day or the next day. Now, in the final column, if that worry or concern is something you can do, you can take action on, then you write down in that third column a step you can take the following day to address it that would take 10 or 15 minutes at the most. So something small, specific, achievable. You're not going to solve the problem. But if the worry or concern is not in your control, you have to write down some sort of acceptance statement, such as, I've done everything I can for today. There's nothing more I can do tonight. I'm going to let it go for tonight. You can pick it up the moment you wake up tomorrow and start worrying, but literally for that night, there's nothing else you can do. So you spend maybe 20 minutes doing this, you set it aside, and what you've done is you've given your brain closure. Your brain is less likely to worry about things for which it has closure. And so when your emotional brain issues that invitation at night to worry about all these things, you can simply tell your emotional brain, you've already taken care of it. You know exactly what you're going to do the next day, or there's nothing more you can do tonight and you're letting it go. So that's one thing to do before you get into bed, wrapping up your day, signaling your day is done. If we go on to the next slide, stop checking the time at night. Checking the time at night at a minimum starts to wake us up. We start doing the math. How long have I been asleep? How much more time have I got? What do I have to do tomorrow? Oh, I better get back to sleep now. So at a minimum, we're doing the math. At maximum, we're stressing ourselves out. It worsens sleep even for normal sleepers. They've done studies on this. When they told normal sleepers to make sure they looked at the time before they got into bed or looked at the time if they were awake at night, took them longer to fall asleep, longer to get back to sleep. In addition to which, you can inadvertently timestamp your brain when you wake up and check the time, because you wake up, you look at the time, there's a little bit of stress, a little jolt of adrenaline. The brain takes note, because the brain always notices when there's stress and says, oh, something just happened. Better make sure he or she wakes up at the same time tomorrow night, so that if same thing happens, we're ready for it. So you can find yourself waking up at roughly the same time every night because you have time-stamped your brain by looking at the clock. Finally, if your alarm is set, and I encourage you all to set alarms to get up at the same time every morning if you're not already, if your alarm is set, there is no good reason to know the time at night. And if your mind insists that you still need to know, what that really tells us, if you have not let your mind shut down fully into sleep. So you have to let go of not just the physical habit of checking the time, but the mental habit of needing to know. So no checking the time at night. Now, if we go to the next slide, you want to learn how to relax. Remember, the only thing that counters that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, is the parasympathetic response, that rest and digest system. How do you do this? Conveniently enough, if we go to the next slide, the best way to do it is start breathing with your diaphragm. I'm sure many of you have heard of this. Hopefully, many of you are doing this. If not, Start practicing tonight. Breathing with your diaphragm, this is a way that yogis, that athletes, that adventurers have all have known about and used to regulate their sympathetic parasympathetic balance. When you breathe with your diaphragm, what's happening is the diaphragm, dome-shaped muscle right under our rib cage, basically separating our lungs from our guts. When we breathe in with our diaphragm, it drops down, creating lots of space for our lungs to expand. So when you breathe in with your diaphragm, if you put a hand just below your rib cage, right above your belly button, you will feel that area expand, but you will also feel the sides of your rib cage expand and your back expand, because when you're breathing with your diaphragm, your lungs are inflating in a 360-degree direction. So that's how you know if you're breathing with your diaphragm. And then when you breathe out, the diaphragm goes back up, so you'll feel those areas gently come back in. Unfortunately, well, we're all born breathing with our diaphragm, so babies do it naturally, animals do it naturally. Unfortunately, as stressed adults, we become tense, our muscles lock up, including muscles on the side of our rib cage, and so our diaphragm gets locked in place. It has nowhere to move. We stop being able to breathe with our diaphragm. Worse yet, we're all told to suck in our gut. That also means you can't breathe with your diaphragm. So in order to breathe with your diaphragm, you have to be fully relaxed, your whole abdominal area. When you're breathing with your diaphragm, this is the key, and you allow your lungs to fully expand. It actually leaves less room in your internal cavity for the other organs. So those organs get a little bit compressed, a little bit massaged by the diaphragm. That actually stimulates the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is responsible for the parasympathetic system. You can engage your parasympathetic system with 3 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing when you get good at it. And you will be able to tell physiologically when you succeed, because you will notice one of three things. You will notice a shift of some kind. Your breathing might slow, or your heart rate might slow, or your thoughts might slow, or you feel a little looser or a little lighter. So it'll be some shift that signals relaxation to you. Secondly, your hands might warm up. The parasympathetic system dilates blood vessels, so when it's stimulated, more blood reaches the extremities, warms up your hands and feet. Thirdly, you might notice more salivation. It is the rest and digest response, so there can be increased salivation. So you can tell physiologically when you successfully engage the parasympathetic system, and the parasympathetic system is the best way to counter the sympathetic system. If you've engaged the parasympathetic system, you cannot engage the sympathetic. Now, if we go to the next slide, it's also important to realize there are many other things you can do for relaxation. Diaphragmatic breathing is a foundation because practicing takes no extra time. You have to breathe anyway. It's always available. You can practice standing in line, sitting in the car, sitting in a meeting, watching TV. You can practice anytime, anywhere. It takes no extra time to get back in touch with what your brain and body already know how to do. But you want to have a toolkit of several relaxation strategies like body scan, progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, meditation, mindfulness, prayer. These are all things you can do on your own with the diaphragmatic breathing. The ones on the right, I just lost my screen. The stretching, the foam rolling, the biofeedback, the gentle yoga, the Tai Chi, these would require probably instructions or equipment or a specialist of some kind. So probably apart from the stretching, a little less available, but there's some very good videos for Tai Chi and yoga, so you can certainly try those. But you want to not only have a toolkit with more than one relaxation strategy, you want to be using them every day. This is critical now. I cannot emphasize this enough. Ultimately, part of getting better sleep is about managing stress effectively. And we are all subject to massive amounts of stress that we have not been subjected to prior to the 8 months during which the pandemic began. So you really, really want to focus on effective ways to manage your stress and help yourself engage that parasympathetic system. That is a whirlwind tour. We can go to the final slide. That is a whirlwind tour. Oh, one more strategy that actually targets all of these systems. So associating your bed with sleep, keeping your bed a clear cue for sleep. If you're doing wakeful activities in bed, you're reading in bed, watching TV in bed, using your phone in bed, working in bed, eating in bed, your brain learns that all of these things are an option when you're in bed. And that actually hurts sleep. You want to train your brain to associate the bed with sleep and nothing else. Now, that's not possible for everyone. The clearest, strongest cue is between your bed and bedroom and sleep. So nothing but sleep takes place in the bed and bedroom. The next strongest cue is between the bed and sleep. So maybe you have to work. Many of us do nowadays. You have your office in your bedroom. So you have to work in your office in your bedroom, but the bed is still reserved for sleep. If neither of those are available and really you just have the one room and your bed is the only surface in which you can do anything, then what you want to do is you want to create one state of the bed that's associated with sleep, like in the dark, under the covers, in your pajamas, and another state of the bed that's associated with wake, like on the opposite side of the bed, on top of the covers with the lights on, dressed. So you can still condition yourself to associate either the bed and bedroom or just the bed or just a state of the bed with sleep, but you want to do this. And if we go to the next slide, it's because when you go to bed or your state of the bed, whatever you're doing, when you're sleepy, it should really say circadian bedtime. So you go to bed when you're sleepy, but not before your circadian bedtime. What you're doing is you're maximizing your sleep drive. You're waiting until you're sleepy, you're getting in touch with those sleep cues, and you're reinforcing that circadian bedtime. So you're reinforcing your circadian system. If you wake up and get out of bed at your circadian rise time every day, no matter how well or poorly you slept, you're reinforcing your circadian rise time in the morning. So you're reinforcing that circadian sleep-wake rhythm, and you're also optimizing your sleep drive. If you've got a night of poor sleep the previous night, and you still get up at the same time in the morning and go about your day, your sleep drive will be even higher the next night, and your sleep will self-correct. You'll get better sleep the next night. You definitely want to get up and out of bed if you are awake for what feels like, you're not checking the time, so what feels like more than 20 minutes, you want to do something relaxing. Number one, you do not want to be lying in bed stressing out. You don't want the bed associated with wakefulness and stress, because that is a cue. That's my timer. Oops. So because that is a cue for being awake longer. You definitely want to, as soon as you notice yourself feeling anxious or starting to try to sleep or wondering what time it is, you want to get out of bed, go do something relaxing and distracting so you're not focused on the efforts to sleep, the anxiety about sleep. Do this until you feel sleepy again, at which time you go back to bed. You'll actually build more sleep drive by standing up, walking to another room and sitting up for half an hour or so than you will by lying in bed. You want to make sure wakeful activities are done somewhere other than the bed and bedroom, or somewhere other than the bed, or in a certain state of the bed, so that the brain gets cued to associate a certain set of conditions with sleep. And you want to use the bed and bedroom only for sleep and sex. So that strategy of reassociating your bed with sleep actually targets the circadian system, the sleep drive, and that stress response. So now we have gone through, you can go to the final slide, a whirlwind tour of various strategies for helping you improve your sleep by targeting your sleep and circadian biology. The advantage to these strategies, as I said, they don't require prescription, they're in your control, all it takes is practice, but it is hard to change habits and behaviors, so it does take time, it does take effort. It's hard to exert effort when we are stressed out, so for the moment, you may have to postpone any changes you're wanting to make until the worst of the stress passes, but I encourage all of you, if there was anything helpful in any of the strategies that you heard tonight, to try to implement them and see what happens with your sleep. Thank you very much.